I mean, we might as well start at the beginning. How do I get licensed? You know what? Let's go even one step before that. What is an adjuster license? And how could it be possibly different than maybe like your driver's license or another kind of license?
Well, the adjuster license gives you permission to work as an adjuster. It gives you permission to touch claims that are originating in states that require a license. It is your ticket to play.
I usually refer to it as the key that opens the door.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's what I say is it's like, it opens more opportunities for you. It's a key to a new state to let you step into that state. So how do I get licensed in my state?
Right. So if you live in a state like Texas, and Texas is very similar to Florida, Arkansas, and Arizona, you just go through our course. And our course is a self-paced course. It's going to take you about 40 hours or so to complete. And then once you're done with our course, there's going to be a final exam. And once you pass that final exam, because you can retake it, you just follow the instructions on how to apply. Quite a few states require that you pass a state exam, not that you complete a course, so that you pass a state exam. And so we have exam preparation courses that, again, are going to take you somewhere around 30 to 40 hours to be ready to pass that test. So states like Montana, Louisiana, West Virginia, they want you to go and take a test. And our course is going to prepare you to pass that in the first try. And then there are 16 states that do not license adjusters. States like Tennessee, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, North and South Dakota. And those states, because they don't require licensing, you qualify for what's called a designated home state license or a DHS license. That's the question I get all the time from non-licensing state residents.
Yeah.
Why do I need to get a license? My state doesn't require a license.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And I tell people, I say, if you want to be deployed to that other state, you have to have the license together. Yeah. And even more importantly, in a lot of cases, if you're doing remote work, they can't assign you a Washington State claim if you don't have the Washington State license. And even if you live in Colorado, which doesn't have a license. Let's kind of dip into what a DHS is. Like it gets kicked around on social media, but what is that?
Well, it's a designated home state license. So you're designating a state for the purposes of licensing. You don't have to live in Florida, have an address in Florida, declare taxes in Florida, anything like that. You're just designating Florida for the purposes of licensing.
Being a great adjuster isn't just about policy and software. You got to know the difference between hail damage and worn-out shingles. Hague has the gold standard books and certifications to back you up in the field or at the desk. Scan the QR code or hit HagueEducation.com and use Adjuster TV for a discount and level up with Hague. I have a question, kind of stepping back a little bit. What's the difference between pre-licensing and exam prep?
Well, some states require a pre-licensing course to be completed before you can take the final exam, and then some states don't require that. So Oklahoma is a state that doesn't require a pre-licensing course. Being brand new to the field and knowing how intense that final exam is, I would not have gone into it not having done an exam prep course. And so taking that course and preparing, it's not required, but definitely wouldn't have done it without it.
Gotcha. So it's a state-by-state thing. So exam prep is to prepare the student or adjuster or whatever to take the state tests, and then pre-licensing is you actually can take the test through you guys, or how does that work?
Well, it can work like that in certain states. So for example, Georgia, Mississippi, and Indiana are two-step states. So there is a pre-licensing course requirement, and then you got to go and sit for the same test at a testing center. I don't know why, but it's just a Georgia, Mississippi, Indiana thing. But pre-licensing for states like Florida and Texas, it does include an exam, and all you have to do is apply. And I think a good point to make, Matt, is that somebody will call me from Florida or Texas or Arkansas and Arizona and say, wait a second, I thought this course was everything I needed. Why does it call the pre-licensing course? Because you could do fantastic through our Florida course, fly through it, finish it in 25 hours, go to apply, and then there's something in your background that's going to deny you the license. So we are not legally allowed to call it a licensing course. It has to be called a pre-licensing course
Gotcha.
because then there's the step of applying and doing your fingerprints and qualifying for the license.
Okay, I gotcha. So, all right, so let's kind of move on to reciprocity then. So, my Montana driver's license allows me to drive in North Dakota. I can drive all the way to Florida if I want to. I can even drive in Canada with my Montana license. So
Nice.
that's reciprocity, right? I got a license, and then it just means that the other
Yeah.
states are going to honor it, right?
Depending on your state of your resident state or where you have your designated home state license, if you're wanting to get additional state licenses, which is what we recommend doing, you would check to see if that state reciprocates. So, for example, Oklahoma, does it reciprocate with California? It doesn't. So I would need to take that state's exam in order to apply for the license. But if I didn't want California and I wanted Texas, I'd check to see if Texas reciprocates with Oklahoma. It does. Therefore, I don't need to take the state exam. I can just apply for the license, pay the licensing fee.
Gotcha. So basically, instead of just giving you carte blanche to just go run around and work wherever you want to in reciprocal states, you still have to pay the fee for the application and you have to apply. You just don't have to go through the other rigmarole necessarily. I mean, is there a possibly a situation where, like, if you get your Florida, you have to get fingerprinted, right? Is that correct?
Right, right. So you have to get your fingerprints, and reciprocity or reciprocal basically means because you have your home state license through testing, and that testing could be again in a simple course or or a state exam, but because you received your state license through examination is how the statutes usually read. We will give you a non-resident license. So Florida and Louisiana. So I have a Florida license. I can just apply for a Louisiana license because I got my Florida home state license. And Louisiana residents can get their Florida non-resident license because they have their Louisiana home state license. So it's a back and forth. Reciprocity in the adjusting industry is very, very simple compared to other fields.
All right, if you're making real money as an adjuster, don't leave your career exposed. Errors and omissions and general liability insurance from Kaplik is designed just for you, and it might even be cheaper than what you're already paying. Snap this QR code right here or visit cplic.net/adjustertv to grab the free guide and lock in smarter protection today. Let's kind of dive into NIPR and CIRCON a little bit. So obviously, when people come to your website and get their home state or their DHS through you guys, in order to get the other reciprocal licenses, they have to go to a third party. This is a question mark I have. Are there states that you have to use one or the other? Like Oklahoma's not on NIPR, but it's on CIRCON, or can you just get them all from either one?
Yes. And I don't know right off the top of my head which states aren't on one site. I know that I don't think Texas is on NIPR. I think it's only on CIRCON.
Okay.
But so they both of the sites will list out all of the states that you can apply for, and you can do more than one at one time, which is really handy.
Yeah.
So you're going to answer all your employment questions, background questions, and then if anything additional is needed, they'll let you know. For fingerprinting, citizenship, paperwork, all that good stuff. But yeah, NIPR I think has more than CIRCON does, but CIRCON still has a couple that NIPR
Gotcha.
does not have.
So adjusters really need to go to both of those sites if they want to try to get most or all the licenses.
And what your home state license creates, and Abby, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is an NPN number.
That was my next question. What the heck is that?
Yeah. It's a national producer number, and it's basically like your number for everything having to do with insurance. And then your license number, so your Florida license number would be specific to Florida.
It follows you. States will issue their own license number, but you'll still have the same NPN number.
Mm-hmm.
So can IA firms or carriers just look up a person by their NPN? And the reason why I ask, and I think it's good to know, is because a lot of adjusters they're putting together resumes when they go to conferences and things like that, and I tell people to list all their licenses but also to list their NPN because they're going to know it, obviously. I don't know if it makes sense to just say, if there's a best practice to say, just list your NPN and then whoever at HR can just pull it up, or should they list them all? What do you guys think?
I personally prefer that they list them all, especially when you're at like NACA and you're showing your resume. And then they're like, oh, wow, you got, Texas, east of Florida, up to North Carolina. Good job. Those are very important states. Also I think you mentioned this and I think you believe in this, but I think having Pacific Northwest or, the Midwest, I think those are great states to be licensed in. I think from my experience, I don't think there's enough adjusters in that area. I don't think enough adjusters want to go to that area, which for me, if I'm trying to break into the industry, I'd be like, that's where I'm going.
Go wherever they can, wherever.
So that's right.
And before I'm going to talk a little bit more about the non-resident licenses, sort of like building a basket. If you can't buy all of them, which ones should you get? But before that, you brought up, Abby, the Florida appointment. What even is that? What does that mean? Can anybody get appointed? Do you have to be appointed by somebody? It's like, how does that work?
For lack of a better explanation, it's just basically that final step that activates the license.
Okay.
So without it, it's not active yet. So either you're an independent adjuster, you will go in and self-appoint.
Okay.
Or your company can go in if you're an employee and the company will appoint for you. But that step has to be done for the license.
Gotcha. Now, is it like a checkbox or is it like another form to fill out, or how's that work?
It's a very simple process. You go into, back on the same website where you originally applied for your license, and you go to the workbench. Click a couple of boxes and then you pay a fee. It's a $60 fee to activate the license.
And what I think is hysterical about self-appointing is basically you're appointing yourself, and they ask, there's a box, who is the appointing entity? And then if you're self-appointing, you just got to put your name in there and pay them their $60.
Right on. Yeah, I get that question, and I don't really know how to answer it, because when I got my Florida license, I was actually working at Liberty Mutual, and they have a whole licensing department. They took care of all of that. I had like 22 licenses or something. When I first started working with them, I had like 6 or 7 licenses. And next thing I know, I got a whole bunch more. But so speaking of other licenses, for CAT adjusters, obviously if you're a daily adjuster and you want to just kind of work locally or regionally, you can get, if you want to add remote desk stuff to sort of like your quiver of things that you do, you want to have as many licenses as possible in either event. But for field, especially for CAT field, let's talk about, like, if you can't get every single license, what are the kind of the best licenses to get that will sort of like the 80-20 of licenses for work for a CAT property adjuster?
So I talk about tier 1 licenses. There's tier 1, tier 2, so tier 1, I would say, again, Texas, east to Florida, north to North Carolina. That L is very busy most of the year, to be honest with you. Texas is massive. Texas gets everything. Hurricanes, tornadoes. The northwest corner, they get earthquakes. So you definitely want to get your Texas license. And again, head east to Florida. And again, if you're kind of constricted by budget, you definitely want to get Texas. You definitely want to get Florida. But ideally, you want to get Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina. That's what I call tier 1 licensing. Tier 2, you're looking at Indiana, Minnesota, Michigan. They're good for hailstorm. And Oklahoma and Arkansas, as Abby can tell you, Tornado Alley. Those are good there too, But it just depends on your budget. And again, I do think that it's a great strategy to think about the West and the Pacific Northwest. Just because, again, you kind of want to differentiate yourself from other adjusters and be willing to go to places where other people are just not looking at. In hurricane season, everybody's like hyper focused on the Gulf, and which is a good thing. It's a good thing. You're ready to go. Hurricane hits, Milton, Helene, whatever, you're ready to go. But then hurricane hits, Milton, Helene, everybody's coming down to this area. And you might say, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of that vacuum in Montana.
Yeah.
or in Washington State, you know. So, you know, it's important to have as many licenses as possible. We've called New York the golden ticket for a long time. Um, you have to test for it. It's not a hard test if you study. If you don't study, it's going to be brutal. But, you know, not many people have that New York license. And I think, you know, and this is what I've heard when I talk to adjusters, they'll tell me, well, I got my Florida license, and so that's one state, and there are 30 licensing states I can get a non-resident license from. So that's 31 states, and then there's 16 non-licensing states. So that's 47 states. Why am I going to take the time to study and then go to a testing center and take a New York license test? And unfortunately, a lot of people have thought like that for a long time. And the last time I went to a PLRB conference, it must have been like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, a speaker said that, and I don't know if this is true, but they said for every 1,000 non-resident licenses, there are only 2 New York non-resident licenses. Because people are just not willing to go that extra mile. And Abby can tell you when we were at NACA earlier this year, we had a gentleman who said, I got my New York non-resident license and it got me work. And it wasn't even New York claims. But just because I had the New York license, they put me to the front of the line. It was crazy.
That is also the same thing that I have heard. I've heard it referred to as the golden ticket.
I referred to it as the golden ticket.
I'm surprised. Well,
in fact, I even had in one of my videos from a few years ago, I had a picture of the kid from the Willy Wonka movie pulling the golden ticket out of the candy bar. So talk a little bit about the New York license. I think there's some mythology around it, that it's super duper hard to get. You have to get bonded. It's a whole big rigmarole. It takes forever. What's the reality of that New York license?
I think that the licensing process, I mean, the exam prep course and the exam aren't any more easy or more difficult than other states. It's the licensing process that's longer. Waiting on your license to be processed can be 4 to 6 weeks. So I think that that's probably the deterrent, maybe.
And it used to be that they even asked for like 5 character references, like you have to have 5 people vouch for you, which I believe they don't do that anymore. And then people would be like, oh, I have to get this bond. Do I have to pay all this money? No, the bond is the amount of money you'll be covered. Just go to whoever you do insurance with and tell them you need a bond. So there are a few extra steps.
I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning, that it's having a license is kind of, you know, it's a little bit of a gateway, right? It's the serious people, or the more serious people are going to go through that. And the New York license takes it to another level, right? Because you can't just get it, apply for it, and just pay the fee. You have to also probably do fingerprints and take their test and do all that stuff. I've worked in New York several times. I've never had a New York license because I worked under like an emergency license. And when I first started this channel, I was like, don't bother getting a New York license or whatever. And then so many IA firms were like, if I see a New York license on somebody's resume, I'm calling them like right away. Even if I don't have New York claims, like you said, because, you know, and the thing about a lot of these licenses that are not in like, you know, traditionally like catastrophe, like wind, hail states, even though, you know, New York, it's hurricanes, is that you can do something that I call deployed dailies, right? And like you were saying, Pablo, about, you know, the big hurricane hits and everybody, you know, you live in Montana or you don't live in Montana, and everybody and their mom goes to Florida or the Gulf or the coast or whatever, and you decide you want to stay behind. Well, if you've got that Washington license or the California license or the New York license or New Hampshire or whatever, the toilets back up and doesn't matter what the weather's doing. The kitchen fires,
right. Water heater breaks and floods your house.
Oh man, I mean, dailies are mostly water claims, but that happens no matter what, and it happens everywhere all the time. So if you can call your IA firm and say, hey, listen, you know, I have a Wyoming license, I have a Montana license, you got to be ready for some windshield time up here, but you know, you probably can get work pretty much right away. And I think the same thing goes for New York. And I know people that do dailies in New York who don't live there. They do dailies in like New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, like that whole area up there. And They just absolutely, I get the messages I get from those people are, hey, how do I take a break? I'm so burnt out. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, and the thing too is that people think New York and they think New York
Mm-hmm.
City. And New York is a
Yeah.
lot more than just New York City, you know? And so you could have a lot of, you know, winter claims out in the country or in areas that are, not rural, but suburban areas that are not
Yeah.
necessarily in the city. And people are actually,
Long
they think,
Island.
oh, New York City, I don't know if I want to go work in New York City. Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, you could work in the whole
Yeah.
state of New York.
So speaking of another big license, let's talk about California a little bit. California also not reciprocal with the rest of those reciprocal states, but they also have a minimum experience requirement. How does that work? Do I have to wait till I get that experience in order to? Is there a lateral experience that I can sub in? I mean, how exactly does that work?
If you look at the statute says 4,000 hours in the experience in the adjusting field. So it's not even adjusting. And I've had individuals who, for example, worked at a body shop, and obviously they handle cars that came in through a claim. I had one lady who worked as a trauma room nurse who obviously had people who came in from accidents that ended up in a claim. They accepted
Okay.
all that stuff. I've called over there and been like, hey, I'm going through this application. Do I need to send you like pay stubs and this and that? And they have told me, and I quote, you just mark yes. It's the honor system. We don't have the time nor the resources to verify if you have the experience.
Gotcha.
And that's for residents. For non-residents, there is no experience requirement. So you can get you're in Texas, you get your Texas license today. Today is what, Wednesday. So, wait 72 hours. So maybe Friday or Saturday, go take your California test, pass it, you'll get a license. There is one loophole to California if you want to work outside of California, if you don't want to handle California claims. So the Florida DHS, in the statute, it says if you qualify for a DHS license, obviously if you live in a non-licensing state, or if your state requires experience and does not provide a staff adjuster license. Texas will automatically deny you. They're like, no, we're not going to give you that license. You're in California, go get your California license first. That's what the statute says. You can try it. And I've yet had to have one tell me no, they didn't get that license. But again, you'd be able to work outside of California. You wouldn't be able to handle California claims. But I mean, if you're doing, desk adjusting, who cares? Or if you want to travel to Arizona and New Mexico and Nevada, who cares?
And working there, man, it was there. It's so dense. Like the houses are just on top of each other for thousands of square miles. Slab leaks, busted dishwashers, toilet overflow, so on and so forth. I mean, it's just absolutely ripe for like deploy dailies, or if you live there, pick up your Florida license. If you don't have any experience, pick up your Florida license and just get after it. I mean, I think that you could get work right away with that strategy.
And 4,000 hours. I mean, what is that as an adjuster?
Yeah. How many 16-hour days is that?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I have to do the math.
Contacting the Department of Insurance in these states, California, for example, you've said that you reached out to them and asked them about it specifically. What if somebody has a felony of some kind on their record from, it was 30 years ago and it was dumb, I was a stupid teenager or whatever it was. How do we handle those? Is that an automatic disqualification?
I do have people, ask me from time to time, I've got a felony. I don't typically like to ask them to go into detail about what it is. And so I might tell them, I'll typically say, because we're not the authority on that. So they should call the Department of Insurance for their state and ask. I think that they're looking for financial type stuff, primarily, but
fraud,
Yeah, like for example, Florida has a link for disqualifying what's called disqualifying offenses. And if you look at it, it's all like fraud, racketeering, bad checks, those type of things. And they're 15 years or younger. So you could have done something 17 years ago They're going to want you to explain it, but it's not going to disqualify you. Um, and I normally don't ask, but typically for some reason I always get I had a felony DUI or drug
Yeah.
possession. Those are typically the ones that I get. And everybody makes mistakes in their youth, and somebody will tell me it was 20, 25 years ago, and I encourage them by telling them usually they're looking for something younger than 15 years. Usually it has to do with some fiduciary aspect, that you violated the trust or something like that.
Yeah.
But call the state.
Yeah.
You got to call the state. That's what we always recommend. Call the state, because I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Yep.
Leave it up to the
And I
state.
think that's what I tell people. I say, basically they're looking for fraud and that kind of stuff. Just call the state Department of Insurance. You can call anonymously. You don't have to say who you are, and they're not going to know. And just ask. And then, I think they take that stuff on a case by case basis. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about continuing education. How do I get it? How much is it? Do I have to get CE for every state that I'm licensed in? How does that work?
If I'm talking to somebody and they're like, well, I think I need CE to renew my license, I'll look to see what the license renewal requirements are. And typically it's 24 hours of continuing education every 2 years. To keep your license compliant. And so, for some states like, Florida requires 4 hours of those 24 to be ethics, and then the other 20 general. Texas is 3 hours of ethics. So, each state will have their own requirements. So you need CE for your resident license, and then the other states that your license reciprocates with and non-resident license will look to make sure you're compliant in your resident state or DHS state. And yes, we have CE for all states.
Could you imagine having to do CE for 31 states?
Having to take the same ethics course over and over again. So, and how much does it cost? Is it like $1,000 or what are we talking here?
For us, it's $49. And CEs are so hard. You can do it with ESPN in the background.
Yep.
It's just kind of like the state saying, we want you to do this. We made you overcome that first obstacle of getting the license. Now every 2 years we need these 24 units. And it's not like you don't learn from our continuing education courses. They're excellent continuing education courses. But it's not like you're going to suddenly be an automotive adjuster because you went through a 2-hour, motor vehicle parts continuing education unit, They're good and you do learn stuff, but they're really more like, it's just compliance, it's just really compliance.
Yeah. Speaking of, so obviously ethics, I think a lot of states require that. But what kinds of classes are we talking about?
Some states require a flood. Oklahoma has an earthquake requirement. It's like 1 hour.
But then any other kind of course that has CE accredited attached to it.
Yeah. We have like homeowners policy, which goes through a homeowners policy. We have an insurance fraud CE course, statutes and law, workers' compensation. We have a ton of variety of courses dealing with all sorts of policies. And they're very simple. They're, self-paced. They never expire. But once you complete the course, we notify the state electronically. So it's not like you have to submit that or anything like that. You just basically, finish the course. Obviously you have to give us your license number, right, Abby? And then you guys do, and then Abby's department does the submissions for the student.
Right on. Do you guys have a ballpark on how much it costs to get every single license, all 34?
Like the original?
No, the first time. Like if I'm brand new
fee?
Adjuster and I've got, a little bit extra money and I want to try to get all the licenses, like what's it going to cost me?
For 16 licenses, it cost me $1,300.
So more than that.
I would say 4,000. Because you got California, California's like 385, and then I know North Carolina is 180,
Yeah.
But then you got
anywhere
states
from
like
50 to...
you got states that are $50. You know what I mean? Yeah. So if you can afford to get as many as you can, by all means, you're going to pad your resume. It's going to help you, But you also have to be strategic about it. Licensing, xactimate training, certifications, maybe NACA, maybe your fast track certification, those type of things. I tell everybody, say you spend $10,000. Let's just say $10,000. This is a 6-figure career and it's an investment. Now, you won't necessarily pay $10,000 up front, but let's just say you did. Probably closer to $5,000 or $6,000.
Yeah.
It is a great investment. You're a new adjuster. You're on the rosters of like Crawford, CNC, Alcat, Team One, Pilot. And you've uploaded your Texas through Florida up to North Carolina. Hurricane Helene hits. They do a search. Who's got Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina? Bing. Oh, here's Matt, right? Whereas I have some students that they'll get their home state license and they say, I'll just wait till the adjustment firm tells me what licenses to get and then get them. Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you for emoting how I feel. And it's like, no, do you want them to find you in the first search or do you want them to find you in the last search? So non-resident licenses, invest a little bit of money. It'll be worth it. It'll pay for itself.
Okay, so you've got your license or you're about to get it. Now learn the brutal truths that kill most adjuster careers before they even start. There's a lot here to avoid, so we created a no BS video that shows you exactly what to watch out for and how to stay in the game.